Hello, my name is Vernon White. If I appear a bit nervous today, I probably am. Primarily because I'm alone in my office in Ottawa speaking to a screen that, based on the way 2020 is going, will not work, and I'll not know until after I'm finished. But I do feel a few moments of telling you who I am is important to the discussion I'm about to have. I spent nearly 32 years as a police officer, 25 years with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, mostly serving in the Arctic, another 7 years as a police chief, retiring as the Chief of Police for the City of Ottawa in 2012. Following this, I was appointed to the Senate of Canada. It's a system similar to the United Kingdom House of Lords, where I continue to sit as an independent senator. I want to thank both Tina for inviting me and Mari for staying connected and arranging this. I'm married to a lady from Oulun, where we have our Finnish home and try to come a couple of times a year. We have a proud Finadian daughter, Ella. Last year, we were lucky enough to spend 7 months in Finland, and she attended school there. But today I'm hoping to speak about a community engagement project that I was lucky enough to be a part of in Ottawa, Canada. To understand what that looked like, I need to as well spend a few minutes on what it takes to engage a community and make those involved a part of the collective, found in any collective initiative. For clarity, a collective impact is seen as a group of actors from different sectors working in a collective to find solutions, often to a specific social issue, in collaboration. I'm a believer in storytelling to bring forward a message, and in discussing community engagement and collective impact, it can often be the best manner for me. Having lived in 17 different communities as a police officer, it is often expected in Canada that the local police are to be fully engaged in the issues of the day, and as well in issues that may be impacting on the wellness of a community. In those communities, I've always looked to surround myself with those who believe, not necessarily in me, but believe in what I believe in. Believe they can be a part of a collective and engage with others to bring about successful change in our community. When I've begun on such a path, I also look for visionaries who will want to be a catalyst for change that will change a community. A quote I like to use: if you dislike change, you're going to dislike irrelevance even more. I take it to heart, as I would argue that making a difference can often only come about when you are willing to embrace change. Often a failure to take on that change challenge leaves people and organizations lacking relevance. Now it's time for a story. I arrived in Ottawa in 2007 as the new police chief. Now Ottawa has around 1 million people, similar to Greater Helsinki and surrounding communities, I believe. I began, as I have in the 4 previous locations where I was in one of the most senior policing roles, with community meetings, holding dozens of community town halls to hear from the members of the public about what they thought their most serious issues were. I met with most of the 2,000 staff, police officers and civilians. I met with a number of different leadership groups, political, religious, health officials, school teachers, and others. My goal was to ensure our police service was engaged in our community, doing the right things the public felt was important to them as much as the police. After all of those engagements, I heard about the normal complaints the police often hear about: public mischief, speeding, drug abuse, drug trafficking, and I can go on. And in fact, in more than a dozen communities I've worked in as a police officer, I could write on a board and 90% of the same issues would be brought forward from fellow officers, community members, or organizations. But in Ottawa, there was one difference. Across the board, people spoke about the level of drug use among the youth and the fact that they could not get help, that the wait list for residential drug treatment for youth aged 14 to 18 years was in excess of 6 months. Now, at first blush, it might appear that although the problem was serious, what could or should the police do about that? I gave it some thought, and a week later was asked to speak at a local mayor's breakfast where I was expected to map out my plan for the next 5 years as the police chief. I stated that having listened to the community, the Ottawa Police Service membership, I would set out as a priority for the organization to build the greatest crime prevention tool the city had seen. People leaned forward in their seats expecting some new law enforcement tool to be unveiled. Instead, I announced that we were going to help open a drug treatment center for youth in our community. Many felt that it was an empty statement, as they had been fighting for such a thing for decades with little or no political interest. Now, I based my assertion on this being a crime prevention tool on the fact that the average street addict will commit 4 to 8 crimes per day. Think about that. What it looks like: every 10 addicts, 40 to 80 victims of crime. Just in this group listening today, you'll see that hundreds of you will be victims of crime every year if that were true. And it is true. In our city alone, we had 432 kids on a wait list, as I said, for 6 months or more. Thousands of potential crimes every day being committed by those addicts looking for help. This means that while awaiting a residential treatment option, Many of these young people would be involved in criminal activity for that 6 months. A lot of bad things happen for a drug addict in 6 months. What does it look like for a parent of a teen waiting for drug treatment? As I had one lady explain to me, sleeping outside of her son's bedroom door, trying to make sure he doesn't escape at night, steal things from the house to sell so he can buy a rock of crack cocaine, a hit of cocaine, crystal methamphetamine, and on. She would then drive him to school in the morning, sitting outside in the car, making sure he didn't run away from the school. She would go home for a couple of hours and have a nap. She'd come back and sit there at lunchtime to make sure he didn't leave the school. And she'd pick him up at the end of the day and bring him home so that she could do that again for the next 6 months so that he could get the help he needed. I'm sure some of you have either witnessed or experienced this yourself. And if you have, my heart goes out to you. Our police service decided we would redefine our purpose, or at least add to our purpose. We put in place a street crime unit to attack dealers, targeting the areas where they were most likely intersecting with our youth. We identified that this greatest crime prevention tool ever would have to have the capacity to serve both French-speaking and English-speaking youth, as we are a bilingual country and a bilingual city. So having the capacity to serve both segments of our community was of paramount importance if we were to be relevant. As a police agency, we asked for no new resources, but rather we asked for any new money go to treatment and intervention of addicts. Stop crime before it starts. The perfect crime reduction and prevention model. There was a desire in Ottawa to build drug treatment capacity, but could we turn that desire into action? For us to be successful, we would have to engage across the city with organizations and individuals. Think about that. Treatment was not available. It would not be my child, of course. I would borrow the $60,000 to send my child away. In fact, many would argue that if you had the money, your child would get treatment, but if not, they would wait. Building on the hundreds of meetings we held, started a working group to build a cabinet or group of people who engage collectively. I knew from previous campaigns I've been involved in what it would take. I also knew some of the potential barriers to success. Two things we needed to fully engage the community and build a collective response. We would need a strong campaign cabinet or group of people that were willing and committed to deliver on this. And we needed to have strong organizations, well-respected and seen as community builders, publicly supporting that effort. My public announcement, building a crime prevention tool or drug treatment center, meant that it would become a priority of the police service and gave it credibility. And we were able to engage in United Way, a community organization that raises funds locally, reinvesting them back in the community, to work with us as we took on this battle. We built a small, robust campaign cabinet to look at a few areas, raising funds for the construction of a drug treatment center, which would be a great demand and difficult challenge, and as well gain support from the provincial government, who are responsible for healthcare, to fund such a facility ongoing, as whatever we built would need some level of government support to maintain over the long term. Our small team looked at some high-level costing of both constructing a drug treatment center and, secondly, running such a facility. Working with local health partners, we were able to find a few local nonprofit organizations that already provided some counseling service to youth on addictions, to see if they had an interest in being a long-term provider for residential drug treatment. And we were able to engage two who wanted to be a part of our collective. Having approximate costing for both construction or acquisition and the running of facilities, now the hard work will begin. You would realize at this point in the campaign that we had dozens of organizations already involved. People were wanting to be a part of a success story, but they weren't convinced we were going to deliver success. Our campaign cabinet, our team, asked me to begin the engagement politically with our local members of the provincial legislature. In fact, I called a local legislative member, who was as well the premier of the province of Ontario, to get early support. But in doing so on a number of occasions, I received no support. No serious engagement, and in fact, if anything, was pushed away by his staff. So we felt it was time to raise this to a public level, gaining their support and maybe outrage at the government's lack of understanding of this challenge. I contacted a national TV producer, CTV, who had a show called W5. It was typically a tell-all expose style, where they raise issues to a national level if they felt it was important enough, similar to the show MOT found in Finland.
This is CTV's W5. Here is Lloyd Robertson.
Welcome to W5. Think of our nation's capital, and images of Parliament Hill, the ceremonial changing of the guard, and skating on the Rideau Canal probably come to mind. But there's another side to Ottawa, a side that few like to talk about and police have to deal with every day. Parts of Ottawa's downtown core have now become overrun with drugs, crime, and prostitution. As W5's Paula Todd discovers in this report, what's happening in Ottawa is nothing short of a capital shame.
It's morning on Parliament Hill.
The government sits on this side.
School kids are on tour, getting a lesson in Canadian history.
And the opposition sits facing them.
Good morning, sir.
If crack kills, the homeless shelters are the killing fields. As the number of addicts explode, they feel the brunt of this street scourge. Shelters are packed to the rafters every night. Addicts sleep in the halls or in makeshift dorms in the chapel because there's nowhere else to put them. In the morning, the dealers will be at the shelter doors or in the street with fresh supplies of drugs. There's no shortage of potential customers here, easy prey for the drug dealers constantly in their face.
As soon as you walk out the doors, I mean, there's just crack. It's right there, accessible, and everyone's smoking it, and everyone's asking you if you want some, or if you want to buy some, or if you have any.
Crack cocaine flooded Ottawa's downtown streets 3 years ago when the price dropped from $10 to about $3 a hit. At the Ottawa Mission, Diane Morrison remembers only too well when crack changed everything on the street.
The community, the businesses, and all the people in this area and the shelters were just reeling with the results of that, which meant there was a lot of crack in the shelters. The behavior of the people that were taking crack was erratic, and we were dealing with issues that we hadn't had to deal with in such numbers before.
Staff Sergeant Paul Johnston and Constable John Gibbons took me on a tour of the neighborhood, including the street they call the vein of addiction.
As you're walking along, you can see some of the needles and some of the, and you see areas becoming into a gated community, so you can see a needle being discarded right there. So
you know Paula? You know,
Paula is a prostitute.
How long have you been doing crack?
19 years.
19 years? Here?
In Halifax is here.
And how fast did you get addicted to it?
Right away, as soon as we did the first one.
How much does it cost to get enough crack during the day to keep you all right?
I spend anywhere from $50 to $500 a day.
A day. Yeah. And how much money can you make on the street?
From $50 to $500 a day.
Police say most female crack addicts prostitute themselves to pay for their habit. The men panhandle in the Byward Market or steal. Street crimes such as theft and shoplifting have soared, but police are working hard to fight them.
Do you hate your life?
Of course, every second of it.
You hate every second of your life?
Yeah. Plenty.
He wanted to speak with modern-day federal politicians about the drug problem in their neighborhood. All of them we called, including tough-on-crime Minister Stockwell Day, said they were too busy to speak with W5. That doesn't surprise local residents.
Well, here you are in the shadow of Parliament Hill. Do you ever see the politicians walking through your neighborhood?
I've never seen anybody come from Parliament Hill. I have cleaned up needles in and around Parliament Hill, though. So the addicts are going to the Hill, but I've never seen any of the people from Parliament Hill come down to our part of town. I think it's disgusting that the capital of Canada has been allowed to turn this rancid.
It's St. Patrick's Day in Ottawa. If there's someone who's hell-bent on saving Ottawa's downtown core from destruction, it's Police Chief Vernon White. He's been on the job less than 1 year, and he doesn't like what he sees.
I was absolutely shocked last February when I came here to meet with the board and accept the job. I was shocked at what I saw in the market.
But we don't have that much graffiti down here, as you see, eh? Tell you the truth.
He's the sort of chief who wants to find out what's going on in the streets for himself.
All it is a place for them to hang around. I watch them going in here, taking turns smoking crack.
Beyond embarrassing, and I think we need to make a concerted effort, first of all, to influence government to change and start recognizing the health issue that this is.
The Ottawa police chief is so desperate that he phoned Premier Dalton McGuinty for help. The Premier grew up in Ottawa, and he is the MPP for Ottawa South.
I requested a meeting in the fall with the Premier during the election, actually just as the election started. I thought it was a good time to actually identify the issues. It's a downtown issue, really, and he's in the downtown area. And his campaign manager of the day called and said no, that the Premier wouldn't be meeting with me during the election, and possibly later. I've called back again later after the election, after they won, and received a voicemail saying that he was busy right now. So we're talking 10 months I've been here as the Chief of Police.
As you can see, we felt that such a show would become a motivator for action from the government. W5 explanation and what it showed really was a city in turmoil. They called it a capital shame. We had children sleeping on the streets, selling themselves sexually to get enough money to buy enough drugs to satisfy them for one night. We had people who had been addicted for years. We had in one case a junior hockey player who came to Ottawa to play hockey, smoked crack cocaine on a Friday night, and for the next 3 years lived on the street and now is a crack addict, had hepatitis B, HIV. So the show, I guess, exemplified exactly what the public were talking about and what the police saw. On the show, I spoke as well about a lack of engagement to this serious issue politically. And I spoke to the 6-month delays and what that meant for young addicts and their families. Sooner to treatment, greater success is a model that people talk about. That if you get a 16-year-old who's been an addict for a year and you get them into treatment, most likely you will find greater success than if they're an addict for a longer period of time. In this way, we were able to raise public awareness, and at the same time, we were hopeful that we would receive political engagement that we were striving. A week after W5, A Capital Shame aired, the Premier of Ontario, who is head of the province and responsible for healthcare, reached out to me. During a meeting, he committed to the operating costs of 2 drug treatment centres for the City of Ottawa. The Premier agreed to this only if our local group, our campaign cabinet, could raise the funds needed to construct those facilities. So having the support of government, while accomplished by twisting arms, would be key to the long-term success. We as well needed to get moving on the development of the programs, clear acceptance of the service providers, and most importantly, getting the whole community behind a massive fundraising initiative. We began with an initial event called Raising the Roof for Drug Treatment. The event was to be a coming out for the program. I called on a famous Inuit singer friend of mine, Susan Aglukak. She had family members who had fought addictions and mental illness, and she brought her band from Toronto, agreed to play for free. In a large donated conference center in downtown Ottawa, we had 18 dining stations, 8 drink stations, all donated by local bars and restaurants who wanted to be a part of this future success. With 700 people at the event, we held a huge concert and had people tell stories about how we were going to change the city, how addictions had impacted them, their families, and their communities. We heard from mothers and fathers of addicts who told us that we needed to start helping to raise every child with addictions and how we could all do our part. We raised 750,000 Canadian dollars that evening, and that was a kickoff to our campaign to build a program to combat addictions among young people in our city. So now the momentum could begin. People who had never thought about being part of such a mission were believing in what I believed in and what the others believed in. Now our concerted, true crowdfunding program would begin. Taking our campaign cabinet forward, we had to first educate the public about the problem. Most parents never shared their child was an addict, remaining isolated and hiding their personal sad journey. So as a result, many felt it was something that happened to others. The next 6 months, I gave more than 150 speeches, sometimes doing a breakfast Rotary meeting and an evening event for parents at a high school. Often I would speak 4 times a day. After that initial 6 months, we found 2 things. 1, that we were gaining traction, and 2, that we had a bigger idea. In the first 6 months, I had spoken at a meeting of the Ottawa Senators Hockey Club Foundation, and at the end, they committed $1.3 million to the cause. We received a $1 million commitment from 20 local Rotary clubs working together. At this 6-month point, we were at $4.5 million and we were gaining strength. The whole city was behind us. They felt they were a part of our success. Second, working with volunteer specialists on youth and addictions, we decided that we would as well put together a proposal to place addictions counselors in our high schools, to catch young people before they fell through the cracks, to give young people the information they needed to make their decisions rather than waiting to pull them off the streets and try to get them into residential treatment. We believed that we were changing the city, that if we worked together, we could be a part of something very special. Doing this, we were able to receive support from people to the right and left of politics, important when driving such an initiative, from tough-on-crime supporters and those who typically look for left-leaning solutions. Regardless of where you were politically, providing drug treatment for youth, and often children, was a priority impossible to ignore. Over the next few years, we stayed on course. We were able to show spectacular success. In fact, 4 years from when we started, we found that our community engagement, public awareness, fundraising, onboarding of the community towards something they now believed in as much as we did. We had opened residential drug treatment centers for both English youth and for French youth. We as well were successful in raising the funds that would allow us to place a drug treatment counselor in all 57 high schools in the city. We called it a school-based program for education. Now, some 10 years after we started, we have 4 different school boards, and we have our counselors in every one of their high schools. We have 2 different service providers providing funding and ongoing funding for this initiative from 7 different donors. In a typical year, as a sample, we saw a gender definition of about 60% male, 40% female in those sessions in our schools. We saw alcohol, cannabis, hallucinogens as the most frequent report abuse substance. We also found that within 3 months of engagement with a school counselor, 16% of clients were no longer flagged for a substance disorder. 23% of clients initially flagged for crime and violence were no longer flagged. 16% were no longer flagged for externalizing disorder, and 13% were no longer flagged for internalizing disorder. In a 1 school year assessment, more than 12,000 students received education prevention counseling, and more than 3,000 parents were engaged in similar outreach. More than 1,400 students received direct intervention counseling. In a typical year, our 2 drug treatment centers will graduate about 350 youth from a 90-day residential drug treatment program. Most will attend distance education throughout their program so they can maintain their education levels and better ensure success. 6 months following treatment, more than 80% will have not returned to their pre-treatment substance abuse. In closing, the journey we took was successful for a number of reasons. We reworked the health issue to make it a police issue, crime prevention, bringing more resources to bear on this issue. We were able to engage different providers that would want to be engaged, but were not able to bring it forward on their own without new partners. We engaged community partnerships, nonprofit and for-profit, and gave them an opportunity to be a part of a bigger solution and success story. We engaged members of the public who were very involved in fundraising and awareness segments of the project. We, as a result of our awareness, destigmatized addictions to show this could happen to any family, mine or yours, any person, in any community. We showed that addiction has no demographic, addictions has no socioeconomic, that no longer we would accept that the rich go to treatment and the poor go to jail. We made this a sustainable initiative, and in essence, this community initiative brought together a collective with a shared purpose to create solutions for a serious and in large part ignored community health risk, youth drug addictions. We were able to fill a serious gap in services by igniting a flame under the community. We have to date raised more than $23 million, impacted thousands of lives directly through residential drug treatment, helped build healthy lives through our school-based programs. We won national, international recognition. We made a difference in the health of our community. Today, that program, support, treatment, education, and prevention, S.T.E.P, has been the result of our collective response to a community problem. I look forward to taking your questions. Thank you.